All right, so have you guys ever seen those crazy music videos with the crazy nuts tube lights? Well, that probably looks something like this. And today, this is the only light we're gonna be using for this whole video, and I wanna talk to you about why this is the most fun studio light, and probably one of the best investments I ever made on this channel. So this is the Quasar Science Q50R, I think. This particular model is actually not available anymore, but they do have something called the Rainbow 2, which basically does the same thing, except on the back it's got a super cool kind of bunch of screw hole rail things, so you can do a bunch of different mounts with it. You don't have the mounting complication of this one. It's very neat. Okay, so today I want to show you a bunch of different lighting setups for this particular light, and basically how you can get not only some pretty cool looking footage, but how a simple light like this can actually be extremely versatile in a way that most of the lights aren't. So we're gonna go ahead and start with one of my favorite setups, which is a top-down shot. Okay, so basically what I have set up here is an overhead rig. Normally I would use a giant kind of softbox right here shooting down towards it, but this look is fairly nice, and I do use it from time to time to add a little bit more dramatic flair. We actually have a custom built frame out of aluminum extrusion with a Manfrotto tripod video head, kind of bent at 90 degrees to shoot down. And then I actually just laid the light right here with a little clamp to give it kind of a side lighting effect. Okay, so now I actually want to show you some existing product shots that I've taken before that I actually think utilize this thing in a bunch of different ways. Not only for the actual lighting of the subject, but actually enhancing the scene in that video. So let's go ahead and take a look at that over here. All right, so I want to show you a couple of shots that have this light being utilized as either the main light to light the subject or as sort of an accent light. We'll start with the accent lights first. So this is an RGB light, so we'll actually show you some video of that in a sec. But something like this was an overhead shot with an A light coming this way, and then this was basically just used as a background or shaping light for kind of the back side of the product, also to give this more of a techie feel and to make sort of the background a little bit more interesting than it otherwise would be if this is all just black. As you can see, it kind of shapes the hands a little bit. It also helps that this is a red product, which is actually this right here. So it kind of just fits the color scheme. But I also have a blue usage right here, just more of a static scene that I would add the scene's not moving itself, so in post I would go back and add a slight moving crop to make it look a little bit more fluid. But this is basically just how I would use it in a blue scene. It's not the main light for this, it's more just an accent light. So let's move over to a shot that is the main light, which is this shot. So this was taken on a Laowa probe lens on a slider, and this is actually the headband of an AirPod Max. Now the Laowa probe lens shoots at like f14, so it needs a ton of light to actually kind of capture anything because it shoots super dark. So I had this light right next to the headphone, and I was using that as the only light for the scene, but I also decided to throw it in as an accent light. And while this is rolling, it looks super, super slick. It looks very modern. This scene in particular looks very futuristic. I actually really like the way this one turned out. Another shot here would be using it off screen as the only light in the video, but it was lighting the subject up to give it more of a dramatic backlit effect. So the front is dark, but the edges on the back and the front are clearly, you know, accentuated a little bit. So I was using the light this way to light up the edge here, and then a bounce to kind of bounce that light a little bit back. And actually, as you can see, there's a little bit of blue in this scene that was probably from my monitor at the time or something like that. These cameras are crazy sensitive. And then this one was a little bit less exciting, but pretty traditional. Obviously, it's not the key light, but it is a little bit of a background accent light that just adds a little bit of interest to the scene in otherwise, you know, what would be a pretty typical, boring looking shot without that light. I want to talk about light placement. The placement of this thing is very versatile, but also I have some words of caution. So one, this is one of the only lights that I like the placement of things either below for a super dramatic effect, above for like a more kind of industrial look, on the side for more of a dramatic look, and obviously it can work on either side. But I do want to talk a little bit about kind of how I would recommend using this for slightly different looks. Okay, so one of the recommendations I have is not to front light this thing. I'm gonna place this in front here, and you'll see that this laptop it looks fine, but it's all kind of washed out, mostly because you have such a wide berth from where the light can come from that things just look washed out. They don't look particularly effective. Now, bottom lighting has some of that same effect, but it really depends on how you place it. So if you place it like this, it gets a little washed out, but if you kind of reduce and use the edge of the light to your advantage, you can kind of tailor a little bit more of a gradient so it's a little bit brighter up here than it is down here. It creates a more dramatic effect that I think I would personally look for. The other tip I have is to almost always try to hit this with a 90-degree angle, or around about 90 degrees of the subject. So from the side, I don't really want to shoot with this at a 45-degree angle to it. I don't think this looks great. I think about a 90-degree angle creates a nice gradient over the whole scene. It makes this highlighted edge stand out quite a bit. And then you can use something like a bounce to fill in some of the empty space on the side. Now, you can go back for more of a silhouette effect. If you're just shooting kind of the top portion of this might provide a nice kind of light shaping around the edges. But I would really stick with like 45 degrees. I think this is kind of the bread and butter look for this particular light and the way that I would use it most often. Now, of course, one of the benefits with this light is that you can actually use RGB. So we'll go super green. It's probably way oversaturated right now on camera. We'll reduce the intensity a lot, and you can get a bunch of different looks. So it's got the full RGB spectrum, of course, nothing too exciting there. One of the things that I like to do is set a light hue of a particular shade. So let's go with orange, and then we go kind of light on the saturation so that it's just a little saturated, but doesn't look just completely orange. It actually looks, pretty decent. So something like this, I think is probably gonna look, pretty good. Now, another thing you can do with these, like with any light, and I don't think enough people consider doing this, is actually controlling movement. So if you're just like zoomed in and focused on that particular scene, you can actually create more of a dramatic shadow effect with a slow light transition. But as you can see, like I said, once you get kind of in front of it, it just kind of gets a little bland and a little boring. So I like to keep it kind of on at least 90 degrees, if not more towards the back, to kind of throw some shadows at the front and kind of shape the product a little bit. Now, this is not going to replace a traditional key light. This will not do certain things that like a more traditional studio light like that Godox VL300 will. But if you want to add some diversity to your shots, I think this is one of the best tools that you can get. So a scene like this would be a little techie, but also a little dramatic. I think it's a nice mix of both. What I might recommend doing in something like this, even though I do think that this soft kind of orangish color, actually it's very creamy, it looks very nice. But because of the blue background here, I think I'm going to change the hue to maybe something a little purple. Oh, sorry, I went the wrong way. A little bit more kind of cyberpunkish. As you can see, just simple placement with an interesting backdrop, I think looks really, really kind of pretty, and I don't know. There's not many lights that will shape the light around a product like this and make them look as cool with as little work as a tube light like this. I do want to give a quick shout out to another company that makes something very similar. It's not quite as good, it's not quite as bright, and it's not quite as color accurate, but they're a whole lot cheaper. They're almost half the price, and that's going to be Nanlite, and they look great. Those things do have one major benefit over this particular Quasar, and that is going to be the fact that they have battery power, which is awesome. And I'm very jealous of those. I think next time I'm looking into getting more of these, I'll probably get the set of 4 that they have for about $1,000, and they're all battery powered, all RGB, and they're great. I love these things. So in conclusion, I think this light is very versatile, but more importantly, and I kind of nerd out about this type of stuff, but I find lights like this inspiring to work with. They make filming fun. They are not only really beautiful in terms of the kind of footage that they can produce with not a lot of upfront cost, to be honest. But they're fun to play around with. They're fun to experiment with lighting. They're fun to see how a tube light like this will shape the edges of something or highlight an area in a particular way or use it as an accent light. You know, if you've never really noticed it before, if you go watch my standard YouTube channel, the Josh Valley YouTube channel, I use this light all the fucking time. So yeah, not only are they very useful, but they're fun to play with. So this is, in my opinion, the most fun studio light.